What do we know about Turkey? Usually people will know that it has some very fine resorts and some antique cities on the west coast. And no wonder that's the place where most of the tourists go. Others who take interest in history may know about a few powerful empires that existed on the territory of current Turkey, the most famous of which are the Hittites, mentioned even by Egyptian pharaohs as equals to them and their brothers. Practically, the whole known antique world was divided between these three very powerful ancient empires, the Assyrians, the Hittites, and the Egyptians. The empire of the Hittites flourished some 3,000 years ago, about 3,000 years ago. But before that, the historians assure us in the textbooks that there were no really interesting or meaningful kingdoms anywhere on the territory of Turkey before that. Andrei Sklarov, the Russian researcher and leader of our expedition, tells us that they went to Turkey in a completely different way, so to say, than their visits to the other countries. Usually they would know at which particular locations they would go in the other expedition, which archaeological sites they would explore, and what to expect more or less. However, in Turkey it was completely different. They had no idea where exactly are they going, and even many people were discouraging them and telling them that it will be completely in vain. I mean, there were only Hittites and simply totally primitive cultures before that. There would be no reason to go and look for some older, more advanced civilizations and artifacts remaining from them in Turkey. But Turkey was such a big and good surprise for their research. They went in a famous temple that supposedly was built by the Hittites, and immediately they found traces of ancient stone saws, marks of those saws on stones. One of the reasons they decided to go to Turkey anyway was that statue in Mykenæ. A piece of stone artwork that was below the gate in this famous place in Mykenæ. They suggested it didn't belong originally to this place. It was added from somewhere else. So they suggested that it might have been brought from Turkey, which is in the vicinity. Particular statue of two lions, it had traces of machine work, and the other reason they decided anyway to go to Turkey is that it's considered the birthplace of metallurgy. According to the ancient legends, the metallurgy was a gift to humanity given by the gods. The reason for which they decided to visit it is that Turkey, at least part of it, is in one of the original regions which was most favorable for developing agriculture in most ancient times. On the very first day, they arrived in Hattusa. Hattusa, or also called Hattusha, is just enormous. It's, tens of kilometers. To reach from one side of the complex to the other, one definitely needs a car, and it's practically the biggest archaeological site, which is supposed to be built originally by the Hittites. Initially, the research team walked in the area for about 20 minutes, and it really started looking like a very huge complex, but not special in terms of any technology used. It really looked like it could have been done by hand. If you had enough big group of men, it would be completely possible to build it. And as they were about to pass on, all of a sudden they noticed a stone that is very much different from all others. First of all, it was the only basalt stone in the vicinity. Immediately they could notice absolutely clear and unmistakable traces of machine work on this stone. In the beginning they noticed that some of the surfaces were perfectly polished. There are also traces from marks left by a saw. Polishing on it was so perfect that when it was new, this stone would have been almost of mirror quality. One could even see maybe one's own reflection in it. It was clearly visible that this stone was part of the base of the structure, and it has been underground for quite a long time. There are no manual tools which can produce such perfectly polished surfaces. It is simply not possible to do it without mechanical equipment. On one of the sides were clearly visible the traces of a disc saw, and moreover this time, unlike some other places in Egypt, the markings, they were parallel to the round. If you remember, they saw very similar traces in Egypt, I mean carved cuttings, but the markings were in the opposite direction. They measured the round trace of the disc and calculated its diameter. It must have been somewhere between 1 meter and 60 and 1 meter and 80 centimeters. Yes, our civilization with our current technology, we do have this type of discs with a diameter of about 2 meters. However, these are not portable tools that we can bring to a construction site. Such tools are only found in huge plants for stonework. However, currently we don't have such type of technology ourselves that would allow us to manufacture similar tools that would be portable because they require a lot of energy, and we simply cannot make it portable at this stage. They noticed also another difference between the ancient tools and the tools that we have at our current disposal. And the difference is that our tools, they cut only with their edge, where there are a kind of diamond material, because that is hard and can cut the stone. While it's clear that with the ancient tool worked not only with its edge, but also with its side. It was cutting and polishing on the sides at the same time. We cannot make such things nowadays. We don't have materials that could withstand this type of pressure. They also noticed some trends that were visible in Egypt as well, and that is that the ancient tools were much thinner than our tools. I mean, we see here traces of a cutting saw, marks that are just 2 millimeters wide, and you saw a minute ago how thick are the cutting discs in the stone factories that we use. I mean, those are a few centimeters in thickness. We're still very far from making such thin tools that could cut stone. So it is really a great mystery. How was it possible? I mean, their tools were much thinner than ours, and yet they could withstand much more pressure and workload than our tools. and on the top do few operations together, like cutting and polishing together. And now you can see a few various marks again left by that ancient tools on the stone. It was interesting that there were really a lot of markings left by various tools on a single stone. It seems as if they were placing other stones near it, maybe to support them, and they were working on them probably, or they were like testing their tools before working, or were they just playing, or it was kind of interesting. Since this stone doesn't match with any other stones in the complex, it is kind of obvious that it didn't have much to do with the Hittites. Probably the complex was built around or on the basis of some structure or just at least pieces of something made by a much earlier civilization. They didn't find much more traces of machine tools in any other parts of the complex except for one other stone which also had cutting marks. But Andrei Sklarov was also a bit impressed by the way some stones were laid in this particular part of the complex. Although the second stone with cutting marks was not that impressive, still it was clearly visible, kind of a miniature small step with a height of 1 or 2 centimeters, and there was no doubt that these are marks of machine work again. Pay attention how these couple of stones fit with each other in a way very similar. The stones are laid in Cusco, for example, in Peru. It's a very difficult to make fitting because the surface between the two blocks is really a three-dimensional surface, and they perfectly fit with each other all along this curved surface. This is very difficult to make, actually. I mean, to replicate the very same surface on two blocks and such a complex surface, and then make them fit absolutely perfectly so that you cannot even fit a sheet of paper in between them, this is really not an easy job. All around there were happy groups of tourists, and their guide was telling them how the Hittites made these stones. And yet, if you look in between a few particular stones, you will see perfectly polished surfaces, an effect which is impossible to achieve with primitive tools, the ones that the Hittites had on their disposal. We see another basalt stone, actually, which the interested tourists have polished with their own hands by touching him all the time. This is not a machine work. This is really done by hand, by caressing it for many, many years. And even the archaeologists decided that this is one of the central artifacts of the full complex and placed it on a prominent place in in the layout of the complex as they restore it. Actually, the very first stone, the one that had lots of various traces of various tools on it, it's also located in a very central place of the complex. Probably that was like the altar place. There is a hypothesis. What about if the Hittites, they brought it from somewhere and actually worshipped it, because they also noticed that these were achievements of stonework that they cannot do, and they knew that this was a heritage from the gods which were inhabiting our earth in ancient times, and that's why they made it an object of worship, like memorabilia from the gods. Now on to the next interesting stone. It had kind of repair on it in a very strange way, as if it was melted down and some other piece of stone was added to it, or I mean, it really didn't make much sense how it happened after all. Additional piece had traces of stone cutting, technologically advanced stuff. We don't even know if this is like a recent addition or is it since ancient times. It's really hard to say. Very unusual artifact to study. The full team really spent a long time looking and guessing what this could be. But also it was interesting that we currently do not have any tool that could leave exactly such type of markings if they take into consideration the orientation of the cutting marks themselves, as if it was done with some sort of a knife that was cutting the stone. We don't really have knives for cutting stone nowadays. So it seems that after all, the legends are much better corresponding to the reality what we can see on the ground, because according to the legends, the town of Hattusha existed much before the Hittites settled in this area. Actually, the Hittites used it for some time. They were not the original creators, as the historians tell us. And yes, here when we go ourselves, we can see that there are definitely a couple of traces of usage of technologically advanced instruments to work with the stones. And we can definitely say that this was not done by the Hittites. They did not have electric saws or anything of that sort at all. And now let's get on to the next very interesting and again unusual archaeological site, that is Alatçı. If one watches any sort of a documentary on Alatçı, usually they would show the gate with the Sphinx, and that would be kind of impressive, and that's how it ends basically. They don't show much more of it. But when the research group actually entered those famous gates with the pair of sphinx on both sides, and right after that, when they had a look at the megalithic structure that was facing the complex, I mean the wall that was behind the Sphinx's and was facing the complex itself, the full team was actually, they were absolutely amazed and shocked. They wouldn't expect even to find such a thing at all. What they saw was exactly the way the stones were laid next to each other was precisely the way it was done in Peru, in the various megalithic structures like the ones found in Cusco and other places. Parallel with the Peruvian way of constructing walls was just to unimaginable degree. Not only it was all the stones had the same absolutely regular shape, but moreover their front surface was dealt with in absolutely same way. You can see like the small channels, kind of channels inside on around each stone, and moreover even the size of the stones used in both places is absolutely the same. We can conclude that it is absolutely the same style, absolutely the same size, absolutely the same looks, and one of them is in Alacıhuyuk in Turkey and the other one is in Cusco in Peru. And at some places where the frequent earthquakes have moved some of the stones a bit on the side, again we can notice that in Turkey as well, the stones fit perfectly with each other, not only on the face of the wall, but all the way in on this intricate surface, the three-dimensional surface between them. And back to the Hittite story, this particular wall has nothing to do with the building style of the Hittites. I mean, the Hittites were building using mortar and soft stone, very small, uneven pieces of stone. Basically, the structures that surely belong to the Hittites, and it is well researched, and it is confirmed that they were indeed built by the Hittites. They look completely different. Those are really primitive buildings that a big group of men could easily put together without much building knowledge, basically. Any logic to imagine that all of a sudden the Hittite builders, stonemasons, they learned how to do this complex and very difficult work of matching complex surfaces of stone and started doing it with very, very hard basalt stones. It doesn't fit any logic at all. The thing that we can notice that is within some of the Hittite buildings, we can see individual stones used within the Hittite structure, but as if out of place. If we examine them carefully, we can see that once upon a time they were part of like Cusco-like building style walls. However, they were not on their original places and they were only used as a building material by the Hittites. Judging from the looks of some complexes that are not yet restored by the archaeologists, it seems that these pieces of very ancient structures, they have been laying around already in total disarray, scattered together without any order. And it seems that they were laying around in that way when the Hittites were building their structures as well. So it seems that Hittites found something that was already ruins. Most likely the Hittites knew that these were remains from the times of the gods, or if they didn't know, they would interpret it in that way because they could obviously see that such type of construction is far beyond their own capabilities. That is why we see very old stones placed chaotically in various ways on various places within the walls of the Hittite buildings. They are a completely different type of rock, and also by the way they were cut, it's obvious that they did not belong there originally. Yet, on the other side of the complex, they find the full area where there are lots of those old blocks. And let's see what is the overall situation. There is a kind of a small miniature valley, and on one side of the valley is that well-preserved wall that looks like a Peruvian work, and on the opposite side of the valley there are remains of this maybe a small building made of these stones. After careful examination, they noticed that as if the stones were thrown away from one center, as if there was a huge explosion at one point that destroyed these structures and kind of shifted some of the stones away. Definitely one of the hypotheses here is that this location was bombed. This could have been been part of the events by the so-called war between the gods, which is depicted in the myths of various cultures all around the world. They have different names for the gods, but the events are very, very similar. I mean, the very amount of chaotically scattered stones at this location really makes one think that there could have been an ancient, absolutely huge and enormous explosion here. I found a very similar situation in some locations in South America, and it seems that at that location the structures of the losers party in the war was bombed, and they left it in that way, in total disarray and chaos. And we see the same thing happening here. Like Peru, we don't see any attempts of ancient restoration of the original structure. Hittites, they couldn't work with such big stones, and the best they could do is sometimes drag some of them and insert them in their walls as a building material. It seems that the gods from the Anatolia, Turkey, and the gods from Peru were on the same side in this war. Another thing that we may notice is the Hittites had a very nicely organized society. They were kind of a bit democratic, and also they didn't believe in punishment, in physical punishment, unlike many other cultures of that time. So it seems that they have some sort of cultural heritage. Maybe there was some cultural link between the times of the gods and the Hittites. And that is how they acquired such unusual for the other cultures of that time elements in their law and other spheres of their life. The next destination is the Mount of Nimrod Dar, and the official version is that maybe there was some sort of burial hill over there that was later on covered with stones, and it was an earlier structure, but some sort of tribal leader made his burial chambers there and made statues and placed them in front of the entry of that hill. And all this would have happened, according to the historians, during the reign of Alexander the Great. However, during those times, the influential people would do completely different burials for themselves. They would have ornate statues and writing in great detail about who is buried and their story and so many other things. The burials of this time look completely different. Another rumor, historic rumor, is that this is some sort of place connected to human sacrifices. But why and how somebody decided to transport uh, so much rubble, I mean small stones, uh, and pile them up and practically make a hill which is 50 meters high just to cover something with it because there have been human sacrifices in it. That is the rumor. So it really doesn't make much sense. This is a lot of work to transport that much of a rubble manually to just cover something up. We are told by the archaeologists that there had been four unsuccessful attempts to go to do some excavations in the hill and go inside and see what it is really inside. But because the small stones were falling on their heads, they decided to give up. This also doesn't make much logical sense. Turkey is a very modern country. They're fantastic tunnel builders. It's not at all for them a technological challenge to penetrate a hill that is just 50 meters high. So really the conclusion about this structure is that it is really very much a mystery and we don't know at all what is it. The next stop in our expedition is Alalak, which is dated by the historians to the first dynasties of the Hittites, or the beginning of their rule. I'm not sure they have dynasties. Sorry about that. And although it has never been a capital or anything like that, it seems to be quite a big complex. And the reason given for that is that it's near the border with Syria, which was an important power at that time. Sorry. After making few rounds in the archaeological complex, the team decided that they're simply not going to find anything interesting connected with ancient advanced technologies anywhere around here because there were the usual primitive things like small stones put together with some clay. But then things changed. Local guide, told them, "Come, I will show you a stone." So they decided to follow him and to see what is the stone he wants to show them, and it was absolutely amazing. First of all, they really made sure that this is really an old stone and is not some recent addition or some place where the archaeologists nowadays are, I don't know, testing their tools or something like that. Again, we see a very familiar situation. This single stone is of completely different um, material than anything around there, anything else. And again, it really looked like some sort of working surface where somebody would try tools. There were traces of various tools all around the stone, in various shapes and forms and all kinds of lines in all directions. As if somebody wanted to make a joke and brought this piece from some modern factory for stoneworking. After a careful examination of the marks left by the tools on the stone, the conclusion is that there are no portable tools that could have left this type of marks. Again, if this is done nowadays, it must have been transported from some sort of stone manufacturing facility to this site. In case these marks were done in the antiquity, this definitely is not the work of the Hittites, and has the origin of this stone is not in this merchant city of the Hittites, but much earlier than that. So if this is an ancient artifact indeed, it seems that after all the Hittites did not establish their city on a field, but on the base of something that was already there from even older times. After having a careful look at some of the marks, they notice that there is a curve. So this particular mark must have been left by a disc saw. Then a guide comes and tells them, "Why are you so interested with this stone? This is a modern stone. This is not an old stone." So the local archaeologists, which were showing them around and told them that this is a new stone, he kind of seemed not very pleased with the fact that some foreigners come and immediately find this, and why are they looking exactly at this stone, as if the Russian group was not supposed to look at this stone for some reason. After that, this archaeologist who told them that this is a new stone, after that he said that he was joking, and he said that this is actually an old stone, it's not new, but the cuttings were made in recent days so that they can take some samples away from this particular stone. But if this was the truth, then the question arises, what kind of tools did they use here on the spot to make these marks? We don't have such tools nowadays. I mean, we don't have portable tools that could leave such markings. Such markings could be left only by machinery found in the factory. Also, this version seems to be questionable because, I mean, what kind of samples were they taking? Just to look at the cuts. It didn't seem as they were cutting something small away. The version of the local archaeologist is really doesn't make sense from any side. If somebody wanted to take a sample from this block, they would just take a hammer and a chisel and take a small part of it. That's the easiest way to do it, and not bring some absolutely super fantastic, super modern equipment that doesn't exist anyway. And one more reason that this is absolutely hilarious idea is that I mean, what would they need a sample from? It's a basalt stone. What will it test it for? There are basalts everywhere. Why would they do that? It simply doesn't make any sense. Let's assume that they wanted to test this particular stone, not because it's a basalt. But why would this particular stone be interesting unless there were cuts on it before? Anyway, if it was a ordinary rock before that, why would they want to test it? It really doesn't make sense. So this mysterious piece of rock, this stone really doesn't match its surroundings. The Hittite complex around it fully matches what we read in the history book in terms of how it has been made, what kind of tools the Hittites had at their disposal. Everything matches perfectly with the history of the textbooks, except this particular stone. The most likely scenario, according to the Russian group, is like this. The excavations on this particular archaeological site are only since 2 years. There had been 2 seasons with 2 different archaeological groups. So the first one found it and couldn't make any sense of it, so just put it on the side and didn't do anything with it because it didn't match with with anything around. And then when the second group came, they didn't know anything about it and decided that it is cut in this way because the first group must have been taking some samples from it, right? And that's how nobody knows actually anything about it. The amazing thing actually is that the current historians and current archaeologists, they do not feel attracted by such strange things. They kind of don't have desire to study them. For example, they consider it an importance of great importance if they find some sort of ancient stamp, and that can tell them so many things about the Hittites. But when they find something strange that doesn't match the environment, they rather feel comfortable to simply do nothing with it and leave it just laying around or hide it somewhere. Or the thing is, it is only one stone. There is a version, a hypothesis that exactly like in the churches, they bring from some other places some historical artifacts that belong to supposedly Jesus or supposedly some saint, and consider such objects sacred, and they worship them in this particular church. Maybe the ancient Hittites, they saw the traces of the gods on this stone and brought it here for worship. Maybe this particular building, they call it palace, but it was also some sort of a place of worship, or had some corner for worship. In the medieval history of Christianity, there was some sort of a line of fashion at that time that some churches were not elaborately painted with icons, but the main the main spotlight was on particular artifacts that would have been brought usually all the way from Asia and would have been considered for some sacred for one reason or another. The destination is Van, the location of Van in eastern Turkey, which wasn't particularly impressive in terms of search for a search of traces of ancient civilization, but there was some sort of tendency that the nearer they got to Iran, the more the handwork was getting more accurate. And there were some places where building blocks were used with very well polished surfaces on the side, but still that was a handwork. It wasn't machine work, because even though fine, there could be seen the traces of the chisels used by the ancient masons. There are a lot of mysteries still waiting to be discovered underneath the earth, especially in eastern Turkey. However, there are hardly any archaeological work going on over there currently because of the political unrest. These are Kurdish regions, and when one visits the modern cities and villages, as if there is some sort of tension in the air. It is as if some sort of bomb can explode at any time. I mean, the bomb of the social unrest. The next stop in our exploration will be the famous Göbekli Tepe. It is a very interesting archaeological site, and it is the only one still which the official, so to say, archaeology accepts to date at about 10,000 years ago. Here, even the official archaeology confesses finally that they really cannot explain and cannot tell us anything about who built it and how built it, how exactly did they build it. But still, they tell us, the archaeologists, you will see even in a few seconds a picture that they have made, how some primitive tribes that were apparently gathering different berries and fruits from the forest around, and were also hunters, all of a sudden they started building these things. And they erected this huge monumental complex, although they had absolutely no knowledge of stone masonry or anything like that at all. They didn't have any tools for stoneworking, but one day they just decided to do it. And not only they decided, but they also did it quite well. So they erected them in the most unusual way. They have, the huge megalithic stones tell us they're put in kind of a base, stone base, and holes were made so that they can kind of put them in the holes. Another interesting detail is that the ornaments that are carved on these stelas are very much in the style that we currently see in, not currently, but we see on the ancient structures of Peru and Bolivia. Ornaments are practically the same. The strange things don't end here. Um, we see various animals depicted with actually quite good detail on the stelas, and there are animals like ostriches and few others that are not typical for the local animals that would live in this region of Turkey at those times. How did the people who built Göbekli Tepe know about these animals, and not only know about them, but as if they saw them in the front of their eyes when they were carving them? The details are so well done. The animals that are depicted in the stone carvings of Göbekli Tepe are usually animals that live in regions of lush vegetation and regions of a lot of rainfall and high humidity. And the climate of Turkey is, in this region and in general, is actually quite dry. It doesn't support the ecosystem needed for this type of animal life. It's a strange animal that looks either like a dinosaur or maybe like the extinct dodo bird. An interesting detail that they noticed is that on the stand where these stelas were inserted, there was a small damage, and you can see the pattern of whatever dinosaurs or these dodo birds. This pattern is going on the damaged surface. So it seems that we have traces some sort of ancient restoration work, or maybe the pattern was placed on something that was already ancient at that time and damaged before that. Maybe it was something else before that. There is another dinosaur carving, a kind of dinosaur, and the head of that animal very much resembles the carnivorous dinosaurs seen on the Ica stones. And again, how many times when we are in Turkey, we find ourselves again in Peru? So what was this place actually? Um, some people, the first connection they can make in their minds when they see it is of a kindergarten, because our kindergartens have images of animals on the walls for educational purpose. Other people associate it with a genetic laboratory for designing various animals. So the results were carved on the wall. Why not? Something else interesting about this full complex is that it was buried in, it was covered with earth. I mean, somebody piled up an enormous amount of earth on it to guard it from something or for some other unknown reason. We have, for example, in Mexico, in Teotihuacan, it was also buried. The full complex was buried with earth on the top. By the way, this requires an enormous endeavor to transport such large amounts of soil and pile it up over there. So what if it wasn't the people who covered it up with earth? What if that was done by the currents of the flood, of the famous flood that happened around, 12,000 years ago. I mean, in this case, even the official historians date this monument at about that time. Also, we read in the historic records that it was the complex was covered with sand. However, when the team arrived on the spot, they quickly found out that it wasn't sand at all. It was a mixture of clay and all kinds of stones and all kinds of things inside, actually. And this mixture that covered the full complex. It perfectly matches what would have been carried to this location by gigantic flood, very strong flood current. That's exactly what this type of currents drag and deposit. Moreover, these stones tell us they were also carried away by this flood, probably, because they were not standing. Even the ones that are standing today for display, they're doing that with the help of recent supports. Because the location of the complex is in reality between two hills, when this violent current passed by dragging all that material with it, the deposits were enough to completely cover the complex that was situated in the dell between the two hills.
Получается, что пространство между холмами